So we now know why Black Widow did not get a funeral in Avengers Endgame and why they're not going to do any sort of funeral or epilogue after Endgame that addresses this in the upcoming Black Widow film. So while sitting down and getting to talk to Empire Magazine, the director of the upcoming Black Widow got talking about Natasha's fate. Because we all know Black Widow, the film, when it ends, we know where she's headed and we know how her story ends. And that's not going to change. Now in this interview, they specifically talked about how the director and how Scarlett Johansson sat down and discussed whether there was going to be any scenes or anything addressing the character's death, and she specifically said there was Scarlett Johansson that said she didn't want this. There would be no funeral in either film. She was kind of refusing that idea from the start, and it came from the idea that she's a very private character, that in these films we don't know much about her, and that she hides behind these faces and sort of masks and identities so people don't know what her fears are, what she's thinking, and that she's, not really one of the big heroes that's highlighted like an Iron Man, that she's way more of a private, lonesome character, and it wouldn't make sense to have the world grieving for her. And again, I really kind of agree with that, because that's what we said here on the podcast after Endgame. We were like, it just doesn't make sense if this character is having this giant impact on the world where nobody really knew about her existence other than the files she leaked. So again, this sort of makes sense, and I'm glad they're not going to address it. I'm glad they're not going to deal with after the Black Widow movie ends, that they're not going to jump forward 5 years being like, and now here's her funeral, and look, it's Yelena standing in the back and nobody notices her. That's waste, and that's almost like pandering, and it's just too convenient, and you probably don't want to do that. We just feel a little kind of, comedic almost, if that makes sense. We have to address this because of a certain amount of fans are outraged on her. Whatever, just move on. We know we're getting a new Black Widow, and it doesn't even make sense that the character would want the funeral because that's not her character. So I really agree with what they're saying, and it kind of just makes sense now on why it was never addressed. Now, am I the only one that feels like this, or are you guys with me on this one? I mean, a lot of you are, but then there's always the people that are like, no, this is how I wanted it. If that's you, explain that in the comments, because I'm interested, because I want to know, would you have liked to see her funeral, and where and how do you think it should have been handled?